Hi, this is Engaging the Disengaged, and I'm Gina Rhoades. I'm an English language specialist with the U.S. Department of State, and I hope that you enjoy learning from this presentation. We're going to begin with a Quizlet quiz, and if we were live, we would be doing this together, but since this is pre-recorded, we won't be able to do it together, but I do encourage you to uh, go to use the handout, and the link to the quiz is there. So I encourage you to do the quiz there. And I also encourage you, if you don't have the handout in front of you, to download the handout because it has all of the links. You might want to make some notes while you're listening or start playing some of the games, but all the links and codes are there. You can, because we're not live, I've also set them up so that you can do them after the presentation is over. So don't stress if you don't want to take time to do it right now, but like I said, they're all on the handout. You may also want to download Goose Chase and WeChat apps if you don't already have them on your phone. We will be using them in here. And like I said, if this were live, then I would ask you to download them so that you have them ready to go when we get to those games. But since this isn't live, if you want to do it later or use them at a different time, then don't stress. But again, the codes for the games that we're going to be playing and the apps, all of that information is on the handout. So uh, if you have the handout, great, you can follow along. If you don't, then you'll have it after the presentation and you can refer to them then. So don't worry if all of these websites and links that I'm clicking on, you'll have them all in the handout, okay? And all right, so normally we would play Let's Quizlet Live. I love playing this game with my students. It's a great way for them to review vocabulary and also we can sometimes use it. I use it as a pre-learning skill so that I can see what they already know about a topic. And so we would be using Quizlet Live if this were live, but since it's not, I do recommend that after this presentation, you go click on the link and look at the flashcards or the flashcard sets that I had set up here. And if you're doing it individually, I recommend using Match because live you need several students, you need several phones to work together, and they have reorganized Quizlet so that you can use it online and the students, instead of being in cooperative teams, they do it individually. It's not quite as fun, I think, as the cooperative teams, but it's still a great way for them to review the vocabulary they've been learning and or review concepts that you've been teaching. And actually, with it individually, you get a much clearer idea of which students have understood what you have been teaching and which ones need some more reteaching. So yeah, so I really recommend using Quizlet and especially playing Quizlet Live with your students, especially online. But when you get in the classroom again, it's also a great activity to use. So today we're going to, again, we've already done the Quizlet vocabulary review. We're going to be talking some about student engagement. Then we're going to do the Goose Chase game. We're going to talk about using WeChat speaking teams. We're going to talk about study buddies and study teams. And at the end, we're going to have a review quiz on a Kahoot. So we'll be using lots of different apps and websites. And again, because this is an electronic village presentation, we are focusing on a lot of the apps that I use to keep my students engaged because they love to use their phones, and I have learned that if you can't beat them, join them, right? Okay, at the end, we will be talking about the references that I refer to throughout the presentation, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of the websites that I don't have time to talk about very much in this presentation, but that I do use to keep my students engaged. Okay, and there we go. Okay, so why aren't students motivated in your class? There could be any number of reasons. We're going to say that maybe they don't feel English is important for their studies. They're not interested in the content. They've been unsuccessful in English in the past and they just assume that they're going to be unsuccessful in your class as well. So they're not very motivated to do much. They're kind of deflated. And it could be from distractions. And we're finding that often our students are motivated, but they're not necessarily engaged because they are distracted. So these are some things that, again, a lot of the reason that I use a lot of apps in my classroom is because they want to be using their phones anyway. So this way, at least I know when they're using their phones, they're using it for something constructive, something I've asked them to use it for. Then what are your other ideas? Well, since we're pre-recording this, perhaps you you can't really share those ideas with me live, but I do think that feel free to share any ideas that you have. Maybe you can ask anything in the Q&A afterwards, or you can maybe there'll be a way that we can chat during the presentation. So I'm not sure, but this is normally what I would do if this were a live presentation. I would give you a chance to talk about other reasons that students may not be motivated in your classroom. So what we're talking about today is engagement, and engagement is motivation plus active learning. And as I was just mentioning before, sometimes the reason that our students aren't actively participating in what we're doing and aren't actively engaged is because they have other distractions or other things on their mind. I mean, it could be that there's a global pandemic happening and they're more focused on that and not as worried about what's happening in your classroom. So there could be any number of reasons why your students aren't engaged, but we're going to look at the different ways that students can be engaged. All right, I think I became interested in this topic when I saw Dornier give his presentation at the conference in Chicago in 2018. So if you were at that presentation, then some of this information on this slide might be a little familiar. But I was really inspired by that presentation, and it made me really think more deeply about how I engage my students and how I can have more active student engagement. And I also, at the end on my references, I have the reference to the new book that finally came out, which I've been waiting for since I saw this presentation in 2018. And it just came out this year, just a couple months ago. So I've recently got it, downloaded it, put it on my Kindle, and I've been reading it. So, and again, the reference for the book that he was researching and writing when he gave this presentation is on the end of this. And so it's written by Mercer and Dornier. And so, like I said, the reference is at the end. So they believe that student engagement means that they need to be engaging with the school context. So be engaged with the school community, with the language. They need to be engaged with the language that you're teaching, whether it's English or another language, with the curriculum and the teaching material. So this is, right now while we're all online, this is very important that they're engaging with the textbook, with the workbook, with the Moodle, with all of the different things that you are using as your teaching materials. The learning tasks, so they need to make sure that you're being actively engaged with a specific task that you're teaching, with their peers. And again, because we're online, this is a little more difficult, but of course there are ways using breakout groups and things that we can have them interact with their peers, but this is also an important engagement that they need. And of course with their teacher, they need to be engaged with you and feel that that it is important and that they feel that you have their back and you are worried about how they're doing in the classroom. Okay. And normally, like I said, I would take time for you to talk about what ways you've tried to keep your students engaged, or one or all of these categories. What ways have you attempted to engage your students in their learning? And maybe we could even talk more deeply about some of the types of engagement that you hadn't really thought about before, or maybe there are types of engagement that aren't listed here. So anyway, if you have those ideas, feel free to discuss them in the Q&A or send me an email, or as I said, if you want to learn a lot more about this, the Mercer and Dornier book is a great place to learn more about it. So we're going to start now with a Goose Chase game. Goose Chase is a great app, and it organizes its games around missions. Okay, so if you haven't already downloaded the app, and entered the code. And like I said, if this were live, we would play this together, but I have set up the game so that it doesn't end until August 1st. So if you would like to play the game, and again, the code is on the handout that I have prepared, so you can play the game after this, after you've watched this presentation. So don't feel like you need to watch it right now, or play it right now. But join one of the teams. There are 3 teams, and it is one of the things that I have learned to be very creative about, is that the free version of Goose Chase comes with only 3 teams. So you might have bigger teams than you would really like to have if you have a big class. But I have found that if you're creative with it, it actually can be really fun, and the 3 teams can be really competitive. So it can be a lot of fun, but that is one of the challenges in the ways that you get to be creative, is that there are 3 teams. So choose one of the 3 teams and try to get as many points as possible. Okay, and as I said, you can set the time for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and play games in different ways. I like to start with a quick game. Like this one, I would probably set for 10 minutes and use it as an icebreaker at the beginning of the semester, something similar to this, and have the students meet together and work together to find the pictures. So this one I've adapted to be done individually, as I'm assuming that you're at your home watching this on your own, but normally we would have you work together with your team. So here you can, you have to be the first one on your team to do this to get the points, okay? But so it's not as much fun as if you were doing it together, but it is still possible to get the points for your team. Okay, so the first one is to take a selfie of you watching this presentation. And the second one I thought would be very fun is to take a picture of a place you want to travel to next. Okay, now that we're all at home, I thought that would be something that we might be interested in doing. Another topic that my students like to talk about are places to shop. Most of the time they're new to Melbourne, and they want to talk about where they've found different things, and sometimes I'll send them out into the city to do some shopping. And another one is pet love. So here you take a picture of a photo with your pet, and you get bonus points if you can get more than one pet in your photo. All right, and the last one, oh well, not the last one, but the next one is using another option that we have in Goose Chase. I usually use a lot of taking pictures or videos, because that's what my students tend to prefer. But sometimes you want to use the written form where they write some information that they found. So in this one, I've asked you to write your best advice for improving English speaking. And so write it here, and then we'll be able to look at your answers for that one. All right, and the last one is worth the most points because it goes a step further. You have to do a little research and find the mission and values. So if you take a video of you reciting TESOL's mission and values, then your team can get a few more points. All right, so now we're going to go, and this one looks a little more deeply at one of the games that I use with my students. In Melbourne, we have a museum that talks about Aboriginal history. And so to encourage the students to go and learn more about that culture, I have an option for them and their team to go and visit the museum. It's a free museum, so it's just a matter of going out. And it says take a video of a team member asking a question at the center. So again, these are very short videos, but it's encouraging them to use English outside of class. And the next one is take a video of a team member asking a question in a pub or restaurant. And here in Australia, the students, I say Australians love to eat in pubs and restaurants. And so when I did this one time I even asked them to specifically to they got bonus points if they ordered fish and chips or if they ordered kangaroo burger. Not that I've ever had a kangaroo burger, but they are on the menus in several restaurants here. So I thought it might be something very Aussie that they might want to try. As you can see, we did this game during October, well, it would be fall in the US, but in Australia it was spring. But and our school had a Halloween party. So to encourage them to attend the Halloween party, I had them do a mission to do something at the Halloween party. And also at our school, we have a lot of we have a language learning center that has a lot of different groups and discussions and things that are optional for the students. So again, to encourage them to attend these, I had options for them to go with their team to the LLC and participate in a discussion group, to participate in a grammar chat. So these are things that are good for them to do, and so to encourage them to do this, another incentive for them to do things that are going to be helpful for them and their language, I included them in the missions. And here's some examples of some of the missions. You can see examples of them eating at a restaurant, attending the grammar chat. This one with the local interviews, the students said that they really liked this one because they ran into a family at a park, and they were able to use this assignment to start a conversation with some locals. And this is one of the things that my students said that they wanted to be able to do, is to speak with locals and to practice with actual Australians. And so in our program, because it's mostly students from, well, most of them are from China, not all, but many are from China. So they have trouble meeting Australians and meeting people from other cultures. So this was to encourage them, and they said they really enjoyed that conversation. So we had a lot of different missions that they did, and one of the things that we really enjoyed doing was looking at the pictures and watching the videos that they had done with their teams in class. And so, like I said, they did a lot of different things in their missions, and they had a lot of fun doing it. So the Goose Chase missions, some of the reasons, I'm going to list some of the reasons here that I really liked doing this project, was that the students bond with their classmates and create friendships. They learn studying skills in an engaging way. So again, this is the main focus of why we're doing this, is that we want the students to be engaged with their learning. They improve their ability to read instructions. And this is one of the benefits that we hadn't really thought about when we first started this, but we noticed that the students weren't always following instructions completely, and they were losing points. So they might it might say take a video, and they would take a picture, or it might say that to get full credit, you need to also write a review of the restaurant you went to, or you get bonus points for however many students went. So they were losing a lot of points because they weren't reading the instructions. So, and of course, they are going to be taking exams, and they need to be able to follow the instructions in the exams. So this was a very helpful skill that they learned from playing these games. It provides incentives to attend activities and events that will improve their skills. So as I was saying, it's an incentive to do things that they should be doing on their own, but this just gives them that extra incentive and reason to go. It also encourages them to ask their classmates to go with them. So if someone says, let's do the grammar chat. If you are encouraging your classmates to go with you or on your team, then you've got that extra support, and you're getting more people involved to help you to improve your skills. Can you think of other reasons? So again, if we were doing this live, we would have a chat about the other reasons that you might want to use these missions and play these games with your students. I'll let you think about that. And also think about what missions you would like to do with your students in or out of class. So I would have you brainstorm and talk about some ideas that would work well with your class, your students, things that you would want to encourage them to do either in an in-class game or an out-of-class game to encourage them to use the language outside of the classroom. So now we're going to look at the lessons we learned from using Goose Chase. It's really important to take time to ask your students what kind of things they want to do to improve their English. This helped me think about what missions I wanted to add to the games, because the students told me what they wanted to do. They told me, like, we want to meet more Australians. We want to go to museums. We want to see more of the city. We want to find out good places to shop. They told me what they wanted, and so I added those missions to the game because it was things they wanted to do, and this gave them an extra reason to do it, and a reason to talk to locals, a reason to do something that they wanted to do, and they were getting points, and they were being competitive with their classmates in the process. Then, like I said, and they were having fun. Right? Give them more than 1 week to complete the missions, especially because our program's very intensive. And I made the mistake the first time of having a completely new game each week, and the students just kind of got overwhelmed. It was fun the first week, but then they just felt a lot of pressure to keep doing the games. And I found that it was better to, instead of having a new game each week, it was better to add new missions each week, and make the new missions based on things that are happening on campus or happening in the community. So like I said, I added, when it became Halloween, I added more Halloween missions, and this was more incentive for them to go to the Halloween party, to find out more about the traditions related to Halloween. It's not something that traditionally Aussies celebrate, but they have started to celebrate it more. And because I am from the US, I celebrate it. So I was pretty excited about the celebration, and encourage the students to participate, and encourage them to watch scary movies and do all kinds of things related to that. And I found it really useful. And another thing is to check missions in class once a week and add the bonuses and penalties accordingly. So at least once a week, you want to see what the classes are doing. And I told them ahead of time that we would be checking every Friday so that they could get everything uploaded and they could see who had the most points at that time. And again, we could talk about if they had followed the instructions or not, and see how they were losing points if they hadn't. And so those were some things that we did, and you can have fun with the bonuses. And another thing, because sometimes the teams were really big, you could say do this with at least, take a photo of at least 3 team members in front of a museum, and if they had all of their team members, or if they got 5, 6, 7, they would get bonus points for how many team members went with them to do this. And of course, if you're going to use this online, you need to be able to adapt these to things that they can do individually to help their team. But those are a lot of different things that you can do with them. And like I said, these missions were really useful, and the students enjoyed doing them most of the time. Another thing you can do is that you can also hide missions. So I wouldn't put all of the missions out at the beginning. Maybe start with the ones that are easier, and then You can unhide missions each week as you're going over and say, okay, this week we're adding these new missions. And so give them new incentives to stay engaged with the game and to stay engaged with their team. All right, so now we're going to move on to another um, team building activity that I did. You'll notice that a lot of them have to do with teams. And these are very similar to the instructions that I gave my students. And I'm going to have you follow the instructions, and we're going to do something similar. Again, the challenge is that I'm pre-recording this, so you won't be able to necessarily do everything at this time, but do feel free to use the WeChat app or another app if you like to do something similar with your students. Okay, so we're going to take out our phone and either open or download the WeChat app and form a group with your team or in a breakout room. If you have your students, you can put them in a breakout room to form their teams and get started. And with your team, you get to first give it a fun name. We named our team We Heart Speaking English. And after you've created the team, the key point is that then they need to add you to the team. So if you create a team, feel free to add me. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. And then with your WeChat team, you're going to first write all of your information. And this is, I found the most useful thing that I did with these groups is that I had them type who specifically was in each team, so I didn't have to keep going back and looking at who I'd put in each team. Or, if you do it randomly, even more important, the fact that I had a written record of who was in each team was very useful. And then you could also match their name with their icon, because often their icon had nothing to do with their name. So I had to be able to go, okay, Iris is actually a daisy and all of these things. So yeah, so that's really helpful. And then just to give me a little more information about them, even though usually I already had this, and also to give them something to start a conversation with their teams, I had them write this information: who they are, their major, their home province, their hometown, so that this kind of gives them something that they can talk about with their teams as they're getting started. So this they did together, and then I assigned them to chat with their team after class about anything they want in the beginning. It's just very specific. But the catcher was that they needed to use the audio function on their phone. And so they're used to usually texting, but I wanted them to focus more on using the audio function and practice speaking instead of just texting to create a conversation. And so each member must send at least 4 audio messages in English that are at least 10 seconds long. And someone must respond to each of your audio messages to create a conversation, or the messages only count as 1 instead of 4. So if you, before I made these restrictions, I had students just having a monologue with themselves, and they did that 4 times. They spoke, and then they were like, okay, assignment done, which was not the objective of the assignment, because the objective of the assignment is to have a conversation. So if you're having a monologue and recording it 4 times, you haven't done the assignment, right? And so I created those extensions, and then I told them when they needed to have it finished by. And of course, I told them that they can text and chat more than 4 times. They can that these four times, 10 seconds is the minimum requirement, and they can do as much as they want. And some of the teams really went above and beyond, and others did the absolute minimum. Just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, I had here's a slide. Here's a picture of from my phone of one student's one team. So Miracle spoke 3 times before he got a reply. So he he knew that when he was doing this, that only one of them was going to count. Just the first one counted because the third one is only 5 seconds, so that's not going to count anyway. But they don't count because there wasn't a reply from, we'll just call her 000. So 000 replied, and she she spoke for 13 seconds. So then she's got one of her 4 minimum, and Miracle's got one of his 4 minimum. So they still need to have a conversation. And they still need to speak at least 3 more times. But as you can see, Miracle's getting a lot of practice in. He was very talkative. So these are just an example of those rules. And like I said, I had those rules to kind of really get the students having conversations. And I also like to encourage the students to remember that they're still learning English, and I don't expect them to be completely fluent. But when they're asking how to say something, they should ask in English. So when they want to know how to pronounce something, they say, "How do you say this in English?" Or if they want to know what something means, they ask, "What does it mean?" And then someone can translate if they want. And so I allowed that, and I always remind my students that they can do this in class, that they could help each other if they don't know the words. Yeah. So now that we've know the rules, it's your turn. And with your team, so normally you'd be at a table or working together with a team. I'd like you to discuss this workshop for 2 minutes and use the audio function to talk for at least 10 seconds. Okay, you got it? All right, so I'm not exactly sure how we're going to get on Teams since this is all pre-recorded, but if you'd like to try it, or maybe you have friends that you can test it out with, or just play around with the app, I do suggest that you do it with your students. So some things that I noticed is some teachers thought that this was really time consuming, but I actually thought it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of students in my class, and over 80. Actually, in 2 classes, I had like 45 in one and 47 in another. And so I had them speaking in teams all the time, but I often wasn't able to hear everyone speak. So I really enjoyed getting a chance to really hear their conversations. And also in most of these apps, in QQ, WeChat, WhatsApp, once you click on the first one, if it's audio, it'll go ahead and play all the audios so that you can just listen to all of them all at once, and listen to the whole conversation. And like I said, they're actually really entertaining. And so I usually would listen in my headphones. When I lived in China, I took the bus and train often. Or sometimes I just listen while I'm brushing my teeth, getting ready for bed. I would listen to the conversations. And usually because I'm on the bus or the train when I'm listening, I didn't have a notepad with me, so I just make notes in my phone of anything that I wanted to talk to them about. I didn't often reply to the conversation, even though I'm a member of each of their teams and I could. Sometimes I would. If I saw that a team was getting way off track, then I would kind of go bring them back in and say, hey, that's not the assignment. Or if they were struggling to learn, to talk about vocabulary, if I saw that they were using something wrong, I might come in and say, oh, the word you're looking for is, and to kind of help them out if I happened to notice it while they were having the conversation. But I usually tried to stay back from the conversation and let them have it, and then come in afterwards and give them some feedback. So this is how I did the feedback. This is basically the slide that I had. It says most teams did a great job, and the teams that didn't knew that they hadn't really done the assignment and they hadn't done a great job, and they weren't going to get that credit for the assignment. And then I would talk about some of the expressions that I heard. For example, some of the teams were talking about how they stay fit and stay healthy while they're students. And so I was teaching them all of these new terms that they could use to explain it correctly, because many of them were using odd phrases, so I wanted to teach them the correct phrases. And also, a lot of these conversations were happening during a really humid time in Guangzhou. And so they were talking a lot about when the floor and the ground are wet. And so I wanted to teach them, they were confusing ground and floor. They were talking about grounds inside their dorm rooms. And so I wanted to teach them the difference between that. That was another one that was confusing them. And then often they like to talk about movies. So there was a lot of confusion between when to use character, role, and actor. So I talked about that. And then another one that I found very humorous was that they kept talking about going to the playground. And then I realized that most of them were not actually going to the playground. They were going to the rec center or they were going to play basketball. So I showed them this picture and I said, look, when you say playground, this is what I think of. And what you really mean is that you want to go to the rec center or the basketball court. So sometimes that's what they were talking about. So yeah, so I was able to help them a lot with their vocabulary. And like I said, because I'm such a huge group, I got to listen and learn a lot about them. Here are some of the assignments that I gave them. I asked them to talk about websites that they like and explain why they think that they're helpful for their English. I had them go to americanenglish.state.gov and look at the resources there and talk to them about their team. And they really came up with some great useful, there's a lot of things on that website that are really useful. And so they had some really good discussions about those. I had them do assignments that were in their textbook. This is one of the textbooks that we were using at the time. And talk about culture and things. So they had to watch a movie with their study buddies. We'll talk about study buddies in a minute. But so they were able to talk about that. And then the last assignment was very similar to the beginning one, but it's just to talk about whatever you want as often as you want. So there were no restrictions. And some of the students really went to town and they had conversations, long conversations. And some of the teams even continued to speak together in English long after the class ended. So they really enjoyed the assignment and they were very motivated. Other teams, not so much. But like I said, I just like to applaud the successes. And so some of the teams really liked it and did a lot with the assignment. So now I just want to talk to you for a minute about why I did this assignment. And like I said, I had really large classes. And that was one of the reasons. When you have a large class, it's hard for them to get a lot of English practice, even if you're putting them in groups often and having them talk. And especially your talkative students don't feel that they get enough opportunities to talk. They want to be able to talk more. And your shy students need a little more encouragement and a push. So that 10 seconds of getting them to talk, that's, at the beginning, that 10 seconds is long and hard if you're not very talkative in English. But by the time the assignment ends, they're getting much longer and they're not, it's not right at 10 seconds each time. They're talking for more like 20 seconds, 25 seconds. And some of them really came out of their shells and really had fun with the assignment. Not all, but there were some success stories, which is good. But also, like I said, the ones who really wanted to talk in English went to town on this. They had absolutely no problem with the minimum requirements, and they really enjoyed the assignment. But like I said, many of the students that I found when I would ask them, like, why don't you practice English outside of class? They would say, well, we don't have anyone to talk to. And I said, look around. You have a whole classroom of people who you can talk to improve your English. But they said that they're just not comfortable speaking English with other Chinese speakers because they feel like that it's much easier to speak Chinese. And I understand that. But at the same time, I said, yeah, but if you really want to improve your English, then your classmates are the perfect people to practice with. So I kind of wanted to encourage them to do it. And like I said, some teams still continued and others only did what they had to for the assignment, but We can only hope, right? So the question is, how could you use this with your students? What would you do to encourage them to speak English outside of class? And how would you adapt this assignment to be used in your online classroom? This is actually really easy, or I should say rather easy to do, because it's already in an app on their phone. So it's not as if you need to adapt a team activity to something on their phone. So it could really be easily adapted to online courses. Okay, so a minute ago, I mentioned study buddies, so we're going to talk a little bit more about who are study buddies and what they do. So when I have this with the students, this is something I do in almost every class that I teach, is I have them decide who their study buddy is, if not the first day, during the first week of classes. And if they knew people, and sometimes they know people and they already have like their best bud, and that's fine, perfect for this assignment. But if they don't, then I have them choose somebody that lives near them, especially if my students live in the same dorm. So choose someone who lives in their dorm if they're on campus, or if they're living in the city, someone who lives in the same part of the city, because it just makes it easier to do a lot of the things. So because this person is responsible for telling you the homework assignments if you're sick, so this takes the burden off me. If somebody is sick, they know that they need to contact their study buddy and find out what they missed and find out what the homework is, so that they don't come to class unprepared. Because if their study buddy doesn't automatically contact them and tell them, then they need to contact their study buddy and get that information. And they can study together and they can work on class projects together. And sometimes I'll assign a project and say, this is to be done with your study buddy. And so I think it's a very useful person to have, and I keep track of who the study buddies are so that I know when I assigned each project, I know who I'm assigning it to. Say, do this with your study buddy, and then if it doesn't get done, I know exactly who the two culprits are. So I do keep track of it. And the reason I bring up the study buddies is that I use these study buddy teams of people that live near each other. And so I had to find this way. I had to find two study buddy groups that live near each other, or I felt would work well together, to create their independent learning teams. And we joined these two of these teams together to normally that would mean there's a group of four. And in their independent learning teams, they use the rainbow roles. And I'm not going to take time to explain rainbow roles in this workshop, but I do have the reference. I wrote an article about it, about rainbow, that includes rainbow learning, and it explains it for the English Teaching Forum. So that reference is at the end. And if you're interested more in how I use these cooperative roles, you'll find out more there. But for the sake of this, that they already knew about their rainbow roles, and they knew what to do, what that meant. And so I assigned them tasks for the first couple of weeks to kind of get this project going. But then I let them work on their own and encourage them to make it a lot more independent after the first couple of weeks. And of course, each week I would spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about what they did with their independent learning team, and encouraging the teams that had forgotten to do their independent learning, because the students in our program have to take an exam at the end of the program. And this exam has a listening test. And so one of the students was in charge of organizing the listening activity for their team. It also has a reading comprehension test. And so one of the people on the team is responsible for organizing the reading assignment. It has a writing test, or they have to write an essay. and it has a speaking test. There's actually a couple speaking tests that are involved in the program. So they have a lot of incentive to do well in all of these areas. So it made sense to encourage them and to give them some guidance on how they could work on their own outside of class to improve these skills and to do well on their assignments. So the independent listening organizer, it was their job to decide what and when they would practice their listening. And we, as I've mentioned before, there's the Language Learning Center, so they could get materials from there, or they could have other websites. So for this example that I had them do for the first assignment, I had them use a specific listening. And again, for their listening test, they have to use Cornell note-taking style, so I had them practice that. And I suggested, again, I'm trying to suggest what's going to help them do best on the test is during the test, they don't get to see the lecturer. It's just an audio recording. So I encourage them to watch it without the video, and maybe the second time they could see the video. For these behind the news, it comes with a video. So I encourage them to practice it without. And of course, there's a quiz at the end, and that again is very similar to what they're going to have in their test. Is they listen to a lecture twice, and then there are questions that they have to answer based on that lecture. So this is again practice for that. And so they can use their notes that they took on the quiz. And then something they might do later after this is they might use Breaking News Dictation. Breaking News English is another website that I'll give you a link to, or BBC's 6-Minute English. So these are just a couple other suggestions that I offered my students that they might want to do later. So I gave them a specific assignment for the first one, but then just encouraged them to try different things. The reading organizer used behind the news what they had listened to. So the first assignment was to read the transcript and do the vocabulary activities related to what they had listened to. Or they might another time want to use active reading, which is a part of Clarity English. Or they might do something from Breaking News English, News and Levels, The Conversation. These are all websites that our students are familiar with, and they can look for something there to help them improve. Or they can read an academic article and discuss with their team. You'll see that I put Clarity English in parentheses because this is a subscription that our school has, and so the students have access to active reading and the others that I'm going to mention, but it is a paid subscription, so I didn't include it in the list of websites because all the ones that I listed are free. So, but if your school finds it useful and wants to have the subscription, it's Clarity English. You can look into it. The writing organizer, again, they have to write a summary and an essay. So I had them practice those skills here. And so there is, they could summarize the key ideas and give their opinion about those ideas, and then talk about how those key ideas relate to their life. So this is, again, how they could practice writing. And then they can read each other's paper and give constructive feedback, again, to help prepare them for this assignment that they're going to have to do. Or they might want to do an activity from Purdue Online Writing Lab, one of my favorite sites. Or again, another one from from Clarity English is the practical writing, or maybe they want to work on their grammar and they can use Tense Buster again with Clarity English. So they had all of these options that they might want to do with their team. And the independent speaking, again, they have 2 speaking tests, so I encourage them to use Behind the News or Clear Pronunciation. Again, Clear Pronunciation is part of Clarity English, that they might use, that they could use at the beginning. And then I gave them, after they did this, then they had a lot more flexibility to discuss a video and article, Practice using the phrases that we give them, a lot of phrases that they should be using when they're doing a tutorial discussion, which is one of their exams. Or practice presenting information because they have to give a presentation based on their essay that they've written. And so they can get constructive feedback from their classmates. So why don't you discuss some of these ideas with your team? Like, again, this is if it was done live, then we would be discussing some of these ideas together. But since it is not, you can feel free to share your ideas about these independent learning teams, or if you've done something similar and you want to share those ideas. Again, you can bring them to the Q&A. You can feel free to email me, anything that you like. And this leads us to the Kahoot challenge. If you haven't used Kahoots with your students, you should because they're a lot of fun. We're doing a Kahoot challenge because this isn't live, but with my students, I actually prefer not to assign the challenges, but to play them in class. Kahoots are fun, but one of the reasons I like them is I get a clear idea very quickly of how many of my students understood what we were just learning, or what we learned last week and they've forgotten, and how many of them don't. So it really gives you a very clear, quick assessment of how many students are getting it and how many aren't. And you can also you can stop after each question and reteach something or explain something if they don't like it. I use it a lot with grammar. So if there's a grammar topic that we've been learning, if I've been teaching them the difference between present perfect and present perfect continuous, I'll do a Kahoot that talks about when to use each one, and I can stop after each question and explain if they got it wrong, especially if several of them got it wrong, then I can explain why this answer was right and why this answer was wrong. So I find it really useful. But again, because this is not being recorded live, I have a Kahoot challenge for you to do, and this is one that you can assign for homework, and you can have the students try to get the highest score together. So it's also a way that you can use Kahoots. And this one, I've given you plenty of time to do. I think this one is near the end of July. I think July 26th was the latest I could do. So I have it. So feel free to do this challenge after you finish. But the questions there's some questions that tell you a little bit more about Kahoots, but most of the questions are related to the things that we learned in this workshop on engagement. So it's kind of a summary and review of what we've been learning. So enjoy. All right, and here are my references. I I always reference Eski. Dr. Eski has a lot of things that has taught me so much in my life. He's actually my dissertation chair. And so a lot of things that he has written, especially this book on teaching second language reading, was used in preparing for this presentation. One of the main references for the article that I was telling you about earlier is the Kagan cooperative learning. So I got the idea for the rainbow learning from reading the Kagan cooperative learning book. And here's the reference for the Mercer and Dornier book that I mentioned at the beginning, Engaging Students in Contemporary Classrooms. It's really a good book and really perfect for today's times when we are all teaching online, and it's so important to keep everyone engaged because we can't be there to physically walk up next to somebody who is disengaged. And so so I think it's a really useful book right now. And like I said, I just started reading it myself, so I'm really enjoying it. And this is the article that I mentioned before. It is on americanenglish.state.gov, where you can find all of the English teaching forums. So if you're interested in learning more about how I organize my classrooms, you'll find that article there. And then this is the Don Snow book that we were using when I was teaching a course on intercultural communication. So there's the references, and here are the websites that I talked about. So most of these I already discussed here, but there are a few others that I haven't. So let me mention a few. This is the one for Behind the News, or BTN. Bamboozle is another team game that you can use. I often use it to practice grammar points with my students. BBC, the 6-Minute English, they have a lot of 6-minute vocabulary. This is a good website. More ways for your students to practice. Breaking News English I talked about. Oh, Ingvid is another great website that I like to use. It's another one. It's really useful for explaining a grammar point, how to write essays, phrasal verbs. They've really done a lot here. The students can do it on their own, or you can use them in class. And when I use them in class, they almost always have a quiz afterwards. So we do the quiz together. And again, then I can see if they've understood or not, if I need to do some reteaching of any points. So I usually do a lot of reteaching of the main points that we've been talking about during the quiz. So it's really useful. ESL Video is another really useful site to keep your students engaged. So again, it's a video that has a quiz afterwards, so you can use that. And oh, lyrics training. I love this one. I use this one myself when I want to practice my French. But lyrics training is a lot of fun, and the students like to yell out the missing word. So sometimes I do that in class. I'll do it with the song playing. It also will help you if you like to create gap fills for your students when you do songs. It creates those for you really fast, which is always nice. And I think, yeah, all the others I mentioned earlier. News and Levels is a lot of fun. So yeah, so check out all these websites. I find them really engaging with my students. And like I said, there are many ways to engage your students that don't always involve websites and apps. But like I said, for the Electronic Village, I wanted to focus on those. So thank you very much for participating. And yeah, I hope you will stick around for the Q&A, and I'll be here to answer any questions that you have. And I hope you enjoyed this and that you find it engaging, and you're able to use a lot of these ideas with your students. Thanks. Bye.